Star Trek, The Next Generation, Starfleet Academy, Loyalties. Chapter 7. Beverly was exasperated. "This is impossible," she thought. "Peter could have died from that simulation. I could have been seriously hurt too." Why couldn't she convince Wiley that he was wrong, that she had been shocked, and that something was wrong with Peter's and Claire's simulation? Why didn't he see? Claire slumped at her desk. The computer screen in front of her blinked, waiting for its next command. "I can't study," she moaned. Beverly sighed. She knew exactly how her roommate felt. After all, her computer remained untouched for the past hour, too. "Claire, I'm exhausted. Let's try to get some rest, think things over. Maybe things will look better in the morning." Claire muttered in agreement. She slowly crawled under the covers as Beverly called for the computers and lights to turn off. It wasn't easy to fall asleep. No matter what position Beverly tried, she felt uncomfortable. Why didn't Wiley want to find out the truth instead of blaming someone else for the accident? When she last looked at the chrono clock near her bed, it was 100 hours. She finally fell asleep and dreamed that she was trying to stop a simulation. She yelled to the computer to stop. She pushed the computer panels along a wall, but no matter what she did or said, the simulation continued. After what seemed like only a short time, she awoke in a cold sweat as an alarm chime sounded. "Claire, time to get up," she said, throwing off the covers. A flashing light on her compad caught her eye. At the same time, she noticed that Claire was not in her bed. She pressed the compad, and Claire's face appeared on the small screen. "Hi, Bev. I just received a message from Mrs. Owner. She said to come immediately, that she felt ill. She's helped me before, Bev, so I wanted to help her. And yes, I have permission from Ensign Lynn. I'll try not to get into trouble. See you later." Beverly quickly brushed her teeth and washed. She ordered a red and black medical cadet jumpsuit from the replicator and dressed. After brushing her hair, she looked at herself in the room's long mirror to make sure she looked neat and polished, as was expected of an academy cadet. "The only flaw on this perfect cadet," she thought, "is the worried look on her face." She looked at Claire's message on the compad screen again. The time said 04:10 hours. It was almost 3 hours since Claire had left the message. She knocked on Ensign Lynn's door and straightened the comm badge on her jumpsuit collar. Ensign Lynn, the dorm's watch officer, was already dressed. "Cadet Howard," the junior class ensign said, grabbing a pad from a table near the door. "I was wondering when you would show up. You found Cadet Boy's message?" Beverly nodded. "Yes, and I'm really surprised. I had no idea Mrs. Owner was ill. Claire usually talks quite a bit about Mrs. Owner." "Sounded like it was pretty sudden," said Ensign Lynn, handing the pad to Beverly. She pushed her left thumb on the pad, registering her thumbprint as identification. "I'll give you a pass for 2 hours off campus," said Lynn, punching the times into the computer. "It will allow you to skip your study period this morning. If you're not back in 2 hours, I'll call you on your comm badge. If you still don't report within 10 minutes of that time, I'll have to put you on report." Beverly nodded. "I've never been to Mrs. Owner's. I just take Leon to Parker Street, right?" "Yes, you can't miss it once you're on Parker. And Cadet," she added as Beverly turned to go, "I didn't mention this to Cadet Boy, but if you don't mind, please let me know what happens," she said, her voice softening. "In my 4 years at the academy, I can't tell you how many times I visited Mrs. Owner's cafe, and I'm worried about her. She's just very special. It was only the second time that Beverly had been off campus since she arrived at the academy. The first was to visit her grandmother's friend the first week of school, but it didn't feel as if she was really off campus. After all, the woman's home was just across the street from the academy grounds. As Beverly walked, she almost forgot about yesterday's troubles. She became lost in listening to the early morning noises of the city. Overhead trams took workers to their jobs in the city. Store doors hissed open for the day. There were also street vendors from several Federation planets laying out their wares, cloth, trinkets, gemstones that tourists like to purchase. Long rows of neat one-story homes lined several of the streets. She stopped once to watch several groups of children playing in a schoolyard in the early morning sunshine. Beverly sighed. If she closed her eyes, she would have sworn this was Arvada 3 at its peak. As she rounded a corner, the front window of a nearby building caught her eye. It was a florist, and there, sitting in the window, was a vase filled with very wide, white, and deep pink flowers. She stared at the flowers before she continued on. They were camellias, her grandmother's favorite. Ensign Lynn was right, Beverly thought. It was not hard to find Mrs. Owner's. The converted one-story home stood out from the rest of the houses on the street. It was painted pastel yellow, with rusty red shutters that matched the stone slab shingles on the roof. Beverly thought the old building looked like a house that was popular during the late 21st century in San Francisco. A large white sign displayed the cafe's name in bright red letters, Mrs. Owner's. The sign in the front door window read closed. Beverly peeked in, then knocked. Claire's face suddenly appeared. Bev, you found me, she said, laughing as she opened the wooden door. It was the first time Beverly had seen her laugh in 2 days. I haven't been laughing much in the last 2 days either, she thought. You're just in time, said Claire. She led Beverly around the wooden tables of the cafe and into the kitchen. Mrs. Owner is making some strange concoction, and I'm trying to convince her to tell me what it is. But I thought she was sick. I had to think of some way to get off campus without getting in trouble, Claire said sheepishly. I just had to talk to Mrs. Owner about the problem with Commander Wiley. Beverly took a deep breath as she entered the kitchen. The air was mixed with the most wonderful smells. She identified nutmeg, cinnamon, and cloves. Suddenly she smelled eumacia, a sweet spice from Beta Z. Then frid, from an Andorian bean that is often used as a coffee substitute. She sighed happily, suddenly feeling comfortable in the big house. Ah, Beverly, come in, you're hungry, said a voice near the old-style kitchen stove. Who wouldn't be with all these smells? Beverly said under her breath as she turned toward the voice. Mrs. Owner's features were soft, like her voice. She was tall and willowy, and her long arms easily reached into a cupboard for a handful of red leaves. Dropping the bunch of herbs into a shiny pot in front of her, she turned to Beverly and smiled. Her eyes were deep sky blue, and she had a ruddy complexion, as if she had just scrubbed her face. Probably from always standing over those steaming pots, Beverly thought. Mrs. Owner turned back to the stove. Ah, no, Beverly, all my people have such a complexion, she said. It is probably from being outside collecting our herbs and spices in the bright sunshine. We have 2 suns in our solar system, you know." Beverly just stared at the older woman. Mrs. Owner smiled again. Her wavy black hair fell around her face as she sniffed the contents of the pot. "Ready for breakfast? We were waiting for you." "Yes, thank you. I haven't had breakfast yet. I came right over from campus," stammered Beverly, realizing Mrs. Owner seemed to know that already, too. "And how is Ensign Lynn?" "Tell her not to worry. Tell her I'm fine," she said, her ankle-length pastel blue dress swaying back and forth as she turned off the stove's burners. Beverly nodded. She realized she hadn't even mentioned Ensign Lynn. "And how did you like the camellias at the local florist? Your grandmother's favorite, right?" said Mrs. Owner. She brought the steaming pot over to the wide table in the middle of the room. "Did you tell her that?" asked Beverly, whispering to Claire. Her roommate shrugged her shoulders and shook her head. "Not me." This time Mrs. Owner laughed. It was a deep, pleasant sound that made Beverly and Claire start laughing too. Beverly didn't know why. Mrs. Owner's laugh was definitely infectious. "Ah, Beverly," she said, ladling spoonfuls of the breakfast into 3 bowls. "I am from the planet Molden. We are... What do you call us, Claire?" "Touch empaths," explained Claire. She moved over to the stove and stirred the contents of a smaller, copper-colored pan. "They understand how people feel just by touch, but Mrs. Owner is also slightly telepathic. She can tell things about people just by being near them." "I prefer that you think of me as a friend, Beverly," Mrs. Owner replied. "Come, sit down, both of you." Beverly enjoyed the smells of the cooking herbs and spices. She also liked the taste of the breakfast porridge Mrs. Owner called yeba. For a moment, Beverly felt homesick again. "The warmth, the smells, and the laughter. It's just like being back at my grandmother's house," she thought. Soon the conversation turned to the problem with the simulation and Commander Max Wiley. "Ah, and so you believe that Claire is not guilty of doing anything wrong," Mrs. Owner was saying, "and Commander Wiley is guilty." "I know Claire didn't do anything during her simulation," responded Beverly, putting her spoon down. "And as for Commander Wiley, I don't know. I do know that I was also shocked during my simulation, but Wiley seems to deny that it could happen. He says I just fell on my hand. And then there are other things that point to the commander." She explained to the older woman why all the evidence pointed to Wiley, even mentioning to Kavar's idea about Wiley and his connection with Kittimer. "But why would he want to hurt us?" "Ah, Beverly," said Mrs. Owner, "it is difficult to say what leads people to hurt others. But tell me, do you really believe Commander Wiley could do such a thing?" "He is very demanding of his students and extremely stern," she responded, still looking into the older woman's eyes. "That was not my question. Do you believe Commander Wiley could do such a thing?" asked the older woman again. Beverly frowned and thought for a moment. "He's definitely a hard teacher, and he's not exactly warm and personable. But no, I don't think he would harm any of his cadets. I think he treats his students sternly because he's so dedicated to Starfleet. He's trying to set an example. He wants us to be dedicated too." Mrs. Owner tilted her head. "And I've tried hard," Beverly said, sighing. "But I really can't imagine him hurting one of his cadets, even if that person did remind him of Kittimer. If he did hurt someone, I think it would be an accident. He would confess that he made a mistake and pay the consequences. Beverly looked down at her empty bowl. I don't know why I feel that way about the commander. It's just a feeling I have. Sometimes feelings are the best way to determine the truth. Claire reluctantly agreed. I guess I can see that too, even though he still blames me, she said, shifting in her chair. After all, why would someone who loves Starfleet so much do something to get themselves kicked out? No one spoke. A small pot on the stove popped and bubbled. Mrs. Owner stood up and went to the stove. As she slowly stirred the pot, she looked at Beverly. There was a quizzical look on her smiling face. Please explain to me. Everyone is checking the holodeck computer for an obvious problem, she said in her soft voice. How about determining if the computer program was tricked? Would it not show a mistake if you ran it again? The cadets stared at Mrs. Owner, then at each other. I suppose so. Don't you think so, Bev? Asked Claire. Maybe, Beverly replied. We tried acting it out. We never asked about running the actual program. Wiley said it worked after our accident, but maybe it's time we did it ourselves, without Wiley around. Oh no, Claire cried. Does that mean we have to get the tape from Wiley? No, we have someone else on our side. Dooley Breach. Come on, said Beverly, standing up and grabbing Claire by the arm. Thanks, Mrs. Owner. I hate to eat and run, but we have to get back to campus and start our own investigation. Chapter 8. Beverly and Claire practically ran all the way back to campus. After signing in and reassuring Ensign Lynn that Mrs. Owner was all right, they headed directly to Dooley Breach's room. Imto Particle is a very patient person, Beverly thought, as she entered Dooley's and Imto's quarters. Imto's roommate had aquariums everywhere, all making bubbly noises like the pots on Mrs. Owner's stove. Close to the farthest wall sat 2 large and 3 small aquariums. Each glass container was half filled with water, lined with rocks and tall grasses, and contained a colorful assortment of Dooley's favorite creatures, newts. Dooley once told Beverly he had been collecting newts for years, and taking care of the tiny creatures led him into the field of medicine. Imto popped up from behind one of the larger aquariums and grinned. Welcome, fellow cadets, to a room filled with newts, he exclaimed. The Arcturan bowed slightly in their direction. We have grasses, we have rocks, and in between we have little red, yellow, and black newts. We even have my favorite, the tiny spotted red newt. It's red-spotted newt, yelled Dooley from behind an aquarium in the corner. Oh, right, Imto continued, bowing toward Dooley. Red-spotted newt. Dooley walked to the center of the room and shook his head. Smiling at his roommate, he carefully pronounced the name of the newt again. Red-spotted newt. Imto shrugged his thin shoulders. Oh, whatever. I still don't know why you like such small creatures, Dooley. On Arctura, our newts are at least 3 feet long, and they glow in the dark. Beverly smirked at Imto. Remind me to watch where I walk on Arctura. Dooley picked up one of the red-spotted newts and held it close to Beverly. Here's my favorite. I wanted to name him Max Wiley, but Imto wouldn't let me, so I call him Sniff. She leaned toward the small, wet creature, putting her finger close to the animal's face. It sniffed at her finger, but showed little interest. Seemingly bored with the human female, it crawled up Dooley's arm to his shoulder. It thinks I'm a rock, said Dooley. Dooley, I like your newts and sniff, but I really came by to ask you a favor. Beverly explained to the two roommates about the confrontation with Wiley and Mrs. Owner's suggestion to check the simulation tape for tampering. Do you think we can get a copy of the tape from that day? Dooley shrugged. It's kept in the main computer room in Regent Hall, he answered. I don't have clearance to get the tapes. Why don't you ask Wiley? Claire winced, and Beverly shook her head. No, we're conducting our own investigation. And anyway, I don't think he'd cooperate. Dooley, we really have to find out if there's any evidence of tampering with the computer simulation. I want to find out if I did get a shock to prove I'm not crazy. But I also want to clear Claire. And maybe Wiley, she thought. So you want me to break into the main computer archives? Replied Dooley, his eyes becoming wide with realization. Not really break into the archives, just copy a tape. Dooley thought for a moment, then grinned. Well, if you must know, you can't always fool a computer expert like myself, he said. He lowered his voice and leaned conspiratorially toward Beverly and Claire. I do know how to get into the main computer center, but no one is supposed to know that I know. And of course, said Imto, smiling and standing next to his roommate, you will need a lookout at the door. Dooley put Sniff back into the aquarium. He pulled out a data pad and started to assign duties. Beverly thought his mannerisms were much like a doctor preparing his associates for a major operation. Okay, Imto, he said, pressing a panel on his data pad. You'll be the lookout. Claire, you'll do the initial search for the tape in the stacks. And Beverly, you're now our speed reader. You find the right file as the data flashes on the screen. I'll work out the codes to cover our tracks and download the tape. The operation was ready to begin. No one suspected the 4 first-year cadets, complete with data pads, walking down a hallway at Regent Hall's computer center, the focus of computer activity at the academy. It was close to lunchtime when few cadets were in the computer building. Dooley talked casually to Imto, discussing computer codes and newts. Claire just smiled weakly at Beverly now and then. They entered the outer study hall of the main computer room. Through a small window, Beverly could see the cadet upperclassman in charge of the room, locking up his computer desk. As they waited for the cadet to leave, Dooley gave them a lecture on the components of the computer system. Beverly wasn't really listening to Dooley and took the time to look around at the computers in the study room. Several times in the past, she visited the building with Dooley, who bragged that the academy was lucky. Their computers ranked with those at Starfleet Command Headquarters. She was always amazed at the intricate layers of crystal memory cards and relays. Lights flashed on and off on the machines, and rows of computer monitors blinked with data and messages. The study room always seemed to be a busy place, yet it was usually eerily silent. For some reason, she thought all computers were always beeping and humming, maybe because of the noisy, outdated computers they used on Arvada 3. The quiet computers in the study room showed her that the machines had come a long way. The scientists on Arvada would have loved to replace their archaic machines with those from Starfleet. When she finally listened again, Dooley was lecturing about computer codes. After about 5 minutes, Beverly sighed with relief as the main computer room door hissed open and the upperclassman left for lunch. She nodded to Dooley as he left, and Dooley continued his lecture. As the cadet disappeared around the corner, Imto grabbed the data pads from the others. He quickly took up his station at the door, ready to signal if someone headed in his direction. Dooley quietly motioned to Beverly and Claire to follow. As they watched, he punched several templates on the computer panel to open the door. The door stayed closed. Dooley frowned, then pushed another combination on the panel. A second later, the door hissed open. He smiled as he waved them into the main computer room. No one spoke a word. The room was smaller than Beverly had imagined. As she looked around, Beverly understood why Dooley mentioned it would be useless to try to hide if they were caught. Rows of computer consoles filled the room, and along one wall were neat stacks of computer tapes. In a few quick short steps, Claire was standing next to the tape stacks. "Thank goodness Wiley keeps such good records," she whispered. Beverly and Dooley quickly shushed her. She shrugged as she continued to search the first 3 stacks. Each tape disc was neatly arranged according to month and day, and in less than a minute she found a tape with the correct date. Grabbing the purplish disc from the stack, Claire reached over and handed the tape to Beverly. Quickly slipping it into the computer console next to Dooley, Beverly stepped back. Dooley's hands danced across the console panel, and a computer screen began to roll through line after line of data. Beverly's eyes darted back and forth as she checked the passing data on the screen. "There," she said suddenly in a low voice. She pointed to a line of text and numbers on the screen. "That's it. Benthos asteroid belt and Romulan bird of prey, simulations number 6 and 7. Dooley pulled another computer tape from his jumpsuit pocket. Pushing his tape into the console, he hit several more panels and smiled. "Copy complete," he whispered. Beverly pulled out the original tape and started to hand it back to Claire. They all froze as 3 short whistles reached their ears. "It's IMTO's signal," Dooley whispered urgently. Beverly had a sinking feeling in her stomach. Someone was coming. Beverly pushed the tape into Claire's hand and turned to see Dooley scramble toward the front door. Suddenly, she heard Claire yelp, "I dropped it!" Claire was on her knees trying to reach between 2 computer stacks for the purplish tape. She groaned as she strained to reach the disc. "My arm's too short." "Here," whispered Beverly anxiously. She bent down near Claire. "Let me get it. My arm is longer." Beverly reached between the stacks, just barely grasping the tape. As she pulled, it wedged itself deeper between the 2 stacks. As she twisted it to the right and pulled hard, the tape suddenly popped out of its trap. She stood up with the tape in her hand and quickly put it into its proper place. Claire grabbed Beverly's arm and pulled her roommate toward the door, but it was too late. "Hey, you two, what are you doing in here? This is an authorized area," came a loud voice from across the room. They froze and looked over to see the cadet upperclassman standing in the door, his hands on his hips. "So much for long lunches," Claire muttered under her breath and leaned against a computer console. Beverly looked at her roommate and grimaced. Beverly knew Dooley and IMTO had made it out of the building, but she and Claire had been caught. Admiral Moody stood beside Commander Wiley. They both stared at Beverly and Claire as the senior cadet escorted them into the Admiral's office. Wiley did not wait for Moody to speak. "I want them out of the academy," he said, glaring at the cadets. Moody turned and frowned at Wiley. "Apparently you have forgotten something, Commander. You, too, are being investigated at this time." "Please," she said, indicating the door. "I would like to talk to the cadets alone." Wiley briskly walked across the room. As the door hissed closed behind him, the Admiral walked forward and stood in front of Beverly and Claire. I don't have to tell you. You're both in deep trouble," she began. "As cadets, you have access to the computer center, and with clearance, the main computer room. But you broke into Starfleet property without clearance, and that is a serious offense. Commander Wiley said that nothing was missing, but apparently a simulation tape was copied. Is that correct? Yes, sir, answered Beverly. Do you want to tell me about it? We were checking on a simulation, Claire responded. Her voice was shaking. The one in which Cadet Peterson was hurt? She asked. Claire nodded. Don't you think Starfleet can carry out its own investigation? The cadets did not answer. I know there were others involved too. What are their names? Sir, I take full responsibility. It was all my idea, Beverly started. And mine too, interrupted Claire. Moody stared at the cadets for a few seconds. This matter will be further investigated, and we will find out who helped you. But for right now, I must put you both on probation. I did warn you, she added, reaching back on her desk. She touched the screen on her computer. There will be no leave for either of you, and you are not allowed to leave campus, she recited. In addition, any further violation of the rules will mean immediate expulsion. She turned back to the cadets. She seemed to hesitate before she spoke. Off the record, cadets, I shuddered when I saw your names on report again. Both of you have been a great disappointment to me. I bent over backward to give you another chance, she said, frowning. Don't you realize that not only are you letting Starfleet down, but you're letting yourselves down? Just think of how hard you worked to get here. Please, for your own sakes, stay out of trouble until we can clear up this mess. Cadets dismissed. Beverly and Claire left Moody's office and walked slowly back toward the dorm. Even the walk through campus didn't cheer Beverly up. Now she was really in trouble. How could she tell her grandmother about being on probation? She pictured her grandmother's face as she received the message, probably the same disappointed look as when Beverly accidentally pulled out all her grandmother's only heirloom Scottish thistle from the garden 6 years ago. No, this was worse, and it could get much worse. What if she was kicked out of the academy? All the time her grandmother had spent teaching Beverly and all the high hopes she had for her granddaughter would be crushed with a single message from the academy. And if she were kicked out of the academy, especially for getting into trouble, what other medical school would want her? There's only one thing to do. Find out how and why Peter Peterson and I were shocked during the simulation. Then the only time I'll have to leave the academy is if I choose to leave. They turned as a voice called from behind. Bev, Claire, what happened? We made it out, but we never saw you again, inquired Dooley, catching up with them. We got caught, explained Beverly. We just came back from Moody's, and we're really in trouble now. She put us on probation. Dooley whistled. Gee, I'm sorry. It's sort of like Max Wiley. Max Wiley? Beverly said, puzzled. Rumor has it he's under investigation until the Peter Peterson case is solved, Dooley answered. I heard he can't teach until this shock incident is cleared up, and it probably didn't help that we broke into the computer center and copied the tape. Beverly blinked. She didn't realize that by breaking into the computer center, she would get Max Wiley into further trouble. In fact, she really didn't think she would be in so much trouble. Dooley, what happened to the tape? She asked. Dooley smiled and slipped a white computer tape out of his jumpsuit pocket. I was able to get some time on Holodeck 3. You ran it? Was anyone hurt? No. I grabbed Imto, Gren, Tikavar, and we played the copied Benthos asteroid and Romulan bird of prey sections over and over again, he said, his usual smile disappearing for a moment. We each played a part in the simulations, and even with 8 eyes, we couldn't find anything suspicious. We even tried scanning with your and Claire's holodeck medical tricorders. No one was shocked. They worked fine. All the other tricorders worked fine. Everything worked fine. Beverly looked puzzled. What? I thought for sure it would show something. Now what do we do? And as Dooley passed the tape to Beverly, it fell to the ground. A passing brown-haired cadet grabbed the tape and handed it back to Dooley. "A crusher," said Dooley, grinning at the upperclassman. "Thanks, Jack." "Sure, Dooley. See you in class." Beverly smiled at the upperclassman as she took the recovered tape from Dooley. "And what, Bev?" I think I have an idea," she said, shaking her head and turning back to her two friends. "We've been banging our heads against a wall so far, but I think there is someone who can help us. Someone who knows everything about computers. Have you two ever heard of a cadet named Data?"